Today is going to be one of the most remarkable conversations you've heard of or had in a long time. It's called the $1 Billion Code. To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. Hey everybody! Okay, so we have
Lisa coming in hot.
Jeff Lisa coming in hot here, and then Jeff right behind. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Lisa. Y'all, we have a amazing show today.
Say that word again. Just say that word again, because the $1 billion code.
The $1 billion code, and here's the reason why. When you start a company and you want to get to a certain point, leadership is the key. How do you guide your team? And our guest today, Chuck Snow, the founder of Traffix, is that person to tell us. Chuck, thank you so much for being here, my friend. After our conversation setting up today's call, just you blew my mind with your beliefs, your strategy, your perspective, and the desire to help serve your entire company, which I believe a true leader is. So thank you.
Yes. That's what it's all about. You're quite welcome.
I think that's the only way you could get to $1 billion too. So,
yeah, I mean, you got to think, right? You surround yourself with the best people. And Chuck, you know, as we get in, why don't you, if you can, I mean, I know there's a lot to the story, but if you can explain kind of the humble roots of Traffix, how you started, and just kind of give us a quick story to get to this point, and then we'll take the story from there.
Yeah, way back, I got a taste of the trucking industry back in 1974. Most of you weren't even alive then, 48 years ago. And for my 21st birthday, one of my buddies rented me a tractor, a cab over diesel sleeper tractor, and we went trucking for a day. And it just
that was your 21st birthday present from him?
Yes.
So gone are the days where like he'd rent you a Ferrari and you go like 200K down the highway.
Yeah. You know, this is a different world, okay, in 1970.
I love it though.
And there's a long story to that too. But anyways, about 3 weeks later, a buddy of mine and I rented a tractor and a trailer, and that really cemented it. It wasn't, pardon my language on air, it was a little bit of a shit show at one point, but it all worked out. And I was hooked. Okay. I was just hooked. And then I went out to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be in the trucking business. Of course, nobody would hire me because I didn't have any experience. And back in 1974, if you didn't have an uncle or a brother that was connected in those days, it was fairly common for people to work in a unionized environment. This is pre-deregulation. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, if you didn't have any relatives in the Teamsters Union or that were in the trucking industry, you didn't get in. It was, you know, because they were good jobs. And finally, I realized that this wasn't going to work. And I found a truck for sale, a 1966 F model Mack cabover with a job. And the job was running into the U.S., which in those days they called with a gypsy company. And what they did was they circumvented the very strict transportation laws. This is pre-deregulation. So how it worked then, just to give our listeners a little bit of an idea, you had a license, licensed carriers had a license either for a commodity or for a route. And they would have a license to haul, or they may have a license for both. So they would have a license to haul waffles from, let's say, Simcoe, Ontario to Montreal, but they wouldn't have a license to haul anything back. So there were a lot of empty miles. Wow. And what we could do is we would rent the truck or lease the truck to the customer directly and just do what we wanted to do. And it didn't take long. I just figured this out, what was going on. I thought, this is an incredible business. This allows us to have all the rights in the world without any cost. I love this. So I just took to it like a duck takes to water. and did that for a while. And then I had some problems with the truck, and I sold it within about 9 months or so. But I stayed active in it. And then I was, for a while, I was getting loads. My family had been in the plant and flower business since 1917. So I saw an opportunity. It just all happened at the same time, where people were crazy for tropical plants in around 1975. There was a boom. They wanted greenery in their homes. And I figured out that I could get loads to go to California or to Florida, rent a truck, rent a trailer, which wasn't that expensive, get a load to go down there, and then buy a load of plants and bring them back. And then I realized I was wholesaling them at first, but they weren't going that quickly. And then I realized that if I did discount retail, I would sell a lot more. The more plants I sold, faster I'd get down to Florida for another trip. So I started doing that, and that worked out really well for a year. And then all of a sudden, the Canadian dollar, which had been stronger than the US dollar by about 5%, took a hit and became 20% weaker. And that kind of blew my business plan to smithereens. Couldn't do it anymore. So I spent a miserable year managing the family flower and plant shop, and was not a happy camper, and decided I got to get back into trucking. So what I did was I did this business plan, and knew my numbers inside out, because, if you're going to start a business, you better have a business plan. And started this little trucking company with one truck, one trailer, one driver. And within a year, I think I had 12 trucks by the time we finished the year out.
That's good growth.
Yeah. And they were all rental trucks. I didn't own a thing. I was just using rental trucks, rental trailers. And we had picked up the Commodore computer account along the way, which is a great story, which I'll do on another show maybe. But it's when you are prepared and opportunity hits you, that's when they collide, that's when you have success. And that's what happened. Anyways, I picked up a load a day, one load a day going to California, one load a day coming back. And along with, those 5-gallon gasoline cans, the red ones you fill up your lawnmower with. Well, there was one major player in that sector called Scepter Manufacturing, and this was during the gasoline shortage. So we made a lot of money. The gasoline shortage of I think it was 1979. And then one day, my first business partner, Peter, and I were talking, and we were having a lot of problems with drivers even back then. And he said, what about us just becoming brokers? And now brokerage was fairly new in those days. It was a new concept. In Canada, there were no large brokers. In the US, they were just, C.H. Robinson had been around for years and years and years already, but they were mostly exempt commodities. And as were most brokers. And then what brokers that didn't handle exempt commodities did was they would actually broker freight for carriers, and they would do something called trip leasing, where they would get a truck and you would run under that carrier's authority in the US. That's how the Americans worked it. And the brokers kind of took a little piece out of that. And Peter said, what about opening up a brokerage here? And I said, I think that's a great idea. We don't have to deal with these guys directly. And we started up. We figured out a name. I came up with the name Traffix, which I told you before, Dan. It's a long, long story, but I'll make it really quickly. I'll make it real quick. What happened was we picked the name Traffix, and I was open my first day of business. I was in the office, and I answered the phone. Good morning, Traffix. I'm so excited. I'm 26 years old. I've got this brokerage. Now, there had been some brokerages in Canada, but they were basement operations, and we were bringing this into the boardroom, and which we did. But anyways, it was like my third call of the day, and it was a gentleman named Gordy Young who had been in the, he was in the trucking business, and he called me because everybody knew me from the asset side. Yeah. And I answered, good morning, Traffix. And he said, what did you say? And I said, Traffix. He said, how do you spell that? And I spelled Traffix. And Gord said, you can't use that name. I said, why? He says, well, number one, I owned a company called Traffix. It's in Brantford. I sold it. They had the worst case of illegal trucking with the Ontario Department of Transport you'd ever want to see. It made case law. And there's still and oh no, I just bought this sign and stationery and all this stuff.
Oh my goodness.
So I thanked them. I called Traffix and I said, do you do trucking? Oh no, we just do warehousing. And good, we don't do any warehousing. So you know what? We just kind of left it. Now I did hear from them about 3 years later. I got a cease and desist letter and we worked it out. And I said, listen, we don't work in the Brantford area. We do no warehousing. And at that point, the owners were older people. And they said, just go do what you want to do. And they let us go. But we did have a long and colorful battle of our own with the Ontario Department of Transport, which morphed into the Ontario Ministry of Transportation and Communication, and then became, I think, Ontario Ministry of Transport. And we got into real battles that took us all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And
wow.
We spent, including my former business partner's time, we spent over $1 million. This is in the 80s, fighting this because we felt that we could legally offer this service to shippers and to carriers, because our whole thing at the time was our focus was to bridge those empty miles. There were small carriers. Now, some of them were licensed and some of them were leasers. Okay. And when a lot of these leasers had their own customers that were shipping out of New York or New Jersey or California, but they needed freight to go down there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were that sales force. So this just took off. And we didn't have a lot of competition because it was an illegal business and we had to fight our way through. And then we went to the Supreme Court and we lost. And then the lawyer called me and he said, we lost our decision. And I said, well, don't worry about it. I said, I need you to appeal it. And he said, you can't appeal a Supreme Court decision. And I said, yes, you can. And he said, well, how do you know about law? That I don't think so. And this guy was a master of law, a graduate of Harvard. He said, how do you appeal a Supreme Court decision? And I said, have you ever heard of a place called The Hague? He said, are you crazy? The World Court? I said, Mel, I don't need to win. I just need time. And he said, no, I got a better idea. How about we just go to another small court with another case in Ontario? It'll cost you a lot less money. So we did, and we actually won.
And second opinion. Sometimes it just takes a second opinion.
You got it. And as soon as that happened, now you got to remember, this was by probably around 1985, 86, somewhere around there. And deregulation was coming here. It had already happened in the U.S. in 1980.
Yeah. And
it was coming here very quickly because of, if you remember, Brian Mulroney brought in the free trade agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And under the free trade agreement, there was something in there called a clause in there called the Freedom to Move Act, which meant that they had to deregulate trucking. So it was going to happen.
So you were just buying time.
Exactly.
So you didn't get shut down in order for it to happen. And then now
Exactly.
you're operating legally. Got it.
Then what happened? You don't know what's, sometimes you can't see around corners. And and what happened to us then was all of a sudden we went to this court, and it was somewhere around London, and judge threw it out in our favor. We won. Shortly after that, just about 3-4 days later, I got a call from the Minister of Transport, actually Deputy Minister. And his first question was, have you gone to the press yet? And I said, no, not yet. And he said, good, don't. Come in here and bring your lawyers. So we went to their office, which was at Keele and 401. And we met with them. And they said, how much have you spent fighting us? And I said, well, including everybody's time, well over $1 million. And the deputy minister looked at me and he said, that's nothing compared to what we've spent fighting you. He said, listen, we have to make ourselves look good. Here's what we're going to do. We will never bother you again. We will sign an agreement, but you have to plead guilty to some charges. So I said, I'll tell you what, the highest fine you could have was $5,000. I said, one ticket, $5,000 for conviction. He goes, no. How about we do 10 for 500? The optics are better. So we did. And they never charged us again. However, 6 months later, the law was changed and deregulation happened. And when deregulation happened, it was pretty horrible for the regulated trucking industry. 95% of them went broke overnight.
Really?
Yes, because they had borrowed money to buy authority. And now all of a sudden, this debt load they were carrying for this license, you couldn't blow your nose with. So the bankers were calling the loans. These great rates they were getting, $6 a mile, $8 a mile, craziness, because they were the only show in that town that could ship to Montreal. They owned that. All of a sudden, the local farmer that was hauling grain with his truck 3 months a year, he went out and he bought himself a $2,000 or $3,000 used trailer, and he took the loads for $2 a mile until somebody went and took it for $1 a mile, and it just happened really quickly. So what happened then was, and then the Americans came in because deregulation happened. And the Americans, this was the last bastion of great rates, was Ontario. And that didn't take long for, and I will name them. I don't think there's anything, the J.B. Hunts, the Schneiders, the Warners, Poole out of Evergreen, Alabama, who's now gone or was bought out. All these companies came in, and they desecrated the market. And I'll never forget, we had this board, because this is before computers. We had this giant board with orders, and by Friday, Monday's orders hadn't been moved yet because we couldn't get any trucks. It was just
so. There's been like these issues ever since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
we had to work our way out of it.
It just keeps going
cycle.
around.
It's all cycles.
It's all a cycle.
Yeah.
Wow. So Chuck, here, that is all. So first things first.
Yeah,
perseverance, stickability. There's a lot of value in what you just said. When you truly believe in something, you go to the ends of earth to make it happen, and that's what real success is. Right?
You have
that
to
journey.
You have to believe in what you're doing.
Yes.
Yes.
And did you ever, when you were setting this up and when you were pushing through all of this? Because I've got a big belief on the end user, right? Whether it be the customer, whether it be colleagues, whether it be students, the end user needs you to be at your best. Did you ever have that mentality where, like, as we grow this company, the people that come into this company, the people that really want to succeed in life, we got to be our best now so they have a chance to come here?
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
100%. You've got to be. If you're not, you're never going to attract or keep good people. And your strength is your people.
Yes.
So you've always got to be, number one, you've got to be on top of your game. Okay. Number two, you've got to be accountable. You've got to be approachable. You cannot be running a business from some sort of an ivory tower where people can't contact you.
Yes.
People need to be able to reach you on your cell, because that's what they sign up for.
Yep.
They want, as you and I discussed, you have people in an organization that are leaders, and then you have people in an organization that need to be led. And if you're not, and they're good people, and they do a lot of phenomenal things, but they want to be led.
Yes.
And if you're not there to lead them, they're going to get lost. You're not doing your company any favors, and you're certainly not doing them any favors.
You know, it's
That's what,
interesting. David Long once said, David Long is a good friend of mine, wrote a great book, Built to Lead, lives in South Carolina. And he said, you know, Dan, in a typical company, there's like 6 to 7 donkeys for every 3 Clydesdales. And he says, and the problem is when you don't really lead from the top and guide people to become the best versions of themselves. Because everybody starts out in this world, and he said that everybody wants to succeed. Because I don't believe anyone wakes up and says, I can't wait to be half mediocre today. It's just we allow things to get in our way to block us intermittently, which
good point.
over time leads to a brick wall. And he says, imagine if you had 8 Clydesdales pulling 2 donkeys. And as those donkeys look up, and he says, I want to be the Clydesdales. And then you have 9, and then you have 10. He goes, and then your business skyrockets. So how did you when you got, and especially, you know, now to the beginning to now, did you always look for Clydesdales, or did you bring people in and say, we can help them become Clydesdales?
We always look for Clydesdales.
What were certain qualities you looked for in pulling that person up to the next level?
And then, you know what, when you realize you had somebody on board that had none of those qualities, you didn't keep them. If there was sometimes there is a place in an organization for those mules. There'll be some tasks, but they're not usually happy. Okay. Yes. And you're always looking for the best, and the best in people. And sometimes you see somebody, it happens all the time, where you see somebody that is behaving like a mule, but they're actually a Clydesdale.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're a thoroughbred Clydesdale. Nobody's ever given them the opportunity.
They haven't peeled
or
back
they just
the
don't believe in themselves enough.
Well, that happens too, but that happens because they don't believe in themselves, because nobody's ever given them the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you give them the opportunity to succeed and to grow, they do. I've watched it so many times where, you know, somebody is better than they think they are. And you spend some time and some energy developing that person. And they sometimes, you know what, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but a lot of times you can get those people to really come to life when you show them some attention and you just give them the encouragement and the tools to do their job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that you said that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that really stood out when you and I had our conversation was, even when Traffix hit $1 billion in sales, the Chuck Snow that started the company, that believed in all of this, remained the same Chuck Snow.
100%.
And to me, that is like, because, you know, there's something to be said when you hit that big beat, right? You know, there's, most companies are like, as soon as they hit $1 billion, it's like, we get a private jet, we get this, we get that, we get this. And you didn't, and you stayed loyal to the original strategy, which was help people, always be available. You need somebody for a sales call, a meeting, I'm in, let's go. Which to me is absolutely remarkable. And it's the essence of a true leader, a true guide for your team.
You can't, as I said earlier, you can't run these businesses from an ivory tower. You've got to get out into the trenches sometimes. If you look at any great leaders, they went out in the trenches. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. Look at Abe Lincoln. He was right out there in the front. As a matter of fact, one of the guards behind him got shot in the eye because he was right up. Winston Churchill, same thing. These are great leaders. They didn't lead from an ivory tower.
Yep.
They went out. We're not, we're in a different thing, obviously, but still, I think that good leadership makes themselves available to go and do sales calls with customers, works with various departments within an organization to make them better. And that's how it's done. That's how you build a company.
I think another hidden quality that you touched on that clearly, I think, in my opinion, you have, because you were strong about talking about the people you found talent in that they didn't believe themselves, but you were able to see it. I guess tell one of your greatest stories of somebody you didn't like. You could tell they had more talent than they were actually putting out. Basically, that mule that you turned into a Clydesdale. It seems like that's clearly was one of your driving passions of what helped with the success of Traffix, and I think that's kind of just one of those qualities of a great leader is finding that hidden talent and morphing them into something more than they even thought they could be.
You're right, DJ, because you can't always just go out and recruit that talent.
Yes.
Sometimes you need to bring in the raw talent and develop it.
Well, yeah, there's hidden talent and there's things locked up inside each and all of us. It's a great guide, a great leader that helps you break open. Nick actually said something really cool here. He said, you see this a lot in sports when a team gets a different coach. Sometimes a player that was written off because a star player, because the coach had a different plan for that person, becoming a Clydesdale from being a mule. And these players all of a sudden turn it up, and all of a sudden, like, where did they come from? Oh, they've been on the team for like 3 years. It's like, what? And now they're thriving because they thrive into that. It kind of goes back to school as well, right? Certain teachers were, I mean, for me anyways, like, can only speak for me. I hated school. I'm a grade 9 dropout, but certain teachers I still remember to this day because they were awesome teachers, and I love that subject. And so
I remember all 2 of them.
But it's the individual that helps pull you through the education, the learning, and all of that. Right.
Yes.
And when you are given the responsibility of leadership, you should never take that lightly.
I agree.
It's the Spider-Man. It's the Spider-Man quote. With great responsibility comes great, or with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. And it's so true. So your responsibility as a leader is to bring out the best in your people. It's pretty simple.
So if you can give us 5 things that you do to bring out the best in people? I know you kind of named 3 already, but if you can share 5 things you do, Chuck, that bring out the best in people that you found work best with building a team globally with Traffix.
Number 1, talk to them. That's most important. Number 2, listen to them. Number 3, work with them. Number 4, really get into put them in a team environment and see where they fit in. And then number 5, just keep checking your work. Don't just set it and forget it, because you have to come back. It's no different than that teacher that gives a child or a student an assignment and said, go and find out why maple trees lose their leaves in the fall, and that's it. It's a teacher that works with that child.
Yeah.
Going through teaching them how to research properly, teaching them how
and
not to
explain things. One of the things I find that is it's rampant in this industry is lack of training.
Yes,
it's just like, and it's not just. It's on the asset side as well as on the non-asset side. It is just now I realize there's been a huge push to add people to the industry in the last 24 months or 30 months. But the lack of training gets people to where they are, gives them their problems. If you spend the time training your people, look at all great organizations spend time and resources on training their people. You don't just bring in kids and young people from college and say, here's a seat, go and sell freight. And, third day on the job, somebody says, ask them, is it and it's usually in carrier sales, that's where they put them, or brokerage. And a carrier will say to the sales or to the carrier salesperson, is that a flatbed, a dry, or reefer? What's that? I've actually had that conversation, because you got to remember, at Traffix, I have worn, I'm not going to say I've worn every hat here, because there's a lot of new hats here, especially in IT, that were never here before. You have to remember, when we started, the only IT we had was a photocopier and an adding machine and a
fax machine with a roll of paper in it.
Exactly. We didn't even have, I'll tell you a funny story. We didn't even have a fax machine when we started. And I remember going on holidays and coming back. In those days, my partner at the time and I used to, we had young families. We did this for a couple of years. We would take a month off each, because he had a cottage and I had a motorcycle and a rural property. And we would each take a month, but we would bridge it by 1 week in between. And I came back after my month, and there's this machine there that is, it's 3.5 feet long, and it's got a roll on it that looks like a small, tight roll of paper towels. And I said, Wally, what is this thing? And he said, oh, it's called a fax machine. And I said, what do you do with it? And he goes, you get faxes from people. And I said, what, faxes? What's a fax? He goes, oh, it's a message. And I go, do we get a lot of faxes? He goes, no, we haven't gotten too many yet. I said, how much was it? He said, $5,000. And this is like 1986 or something. And I just shook my head and okay. And I got to say, that was the first technology that was a real game changer for the broker and the carrier. Because we used to have to phone all these carriers and ask them where they had trucks, or they would have to phone us and tell us where they were going to be. And we kept a board of who was going to be where, and we would just pick off inventory as loads became available. So, it just, things have changed.
Yeah. And especially nowadays, IT, it looked nothing like what it did even 20 something years ago when I got in. It was, it's IT is a whole different game right now. So I can imagine you don't want to wear those hats, because that would be a serious learning curve.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah,
exactly. Really, the 3PL industry has truly become a tech play now.
Yes. You got to have a huge tech stack in order to compete in today's day.
Yeah. And a lot of, unfortunately, an awful lot of smaller brokers that have good businesses are being forced to either sell or to do something because they don't want to invest the money in technology. You have
they're going to kind of stay at that plateau that they're at typically.
And they know they can't.
Customers they're with. Yeah.
One of the things that's happening, Dan, is customers are starting to, and they've been doing it for a while. We've seen this for the last 15 years anyways. Customers are demanding more and more from their suppliers as far as tech. And if you're not willing, and tech's not cheap, and if you're not willing to spend $500,000 or $1 million to upgrade depending on what your customers want, but if you're not willing to spend that, then they're not willing to use you anymore. It's not that they don't like you. That's what in turn, that's what their customers are demanding.
Yep. Is it fair to say the people that will not invest that to go to that next level could potentially be the next blockbusters? I mean,
and that's going on all over. Yeah, these smaller.
It's actually a great analogy, DJ.
Yeah, you have small brokers all over North America that some of them they're not tiny, but they're they can be $30 or $50 million brokerage houses that are owned by people in their 60s that are going, you know what, I really don't want to spend $1 million right now.
Sell the business and retire and enjoy.
Exactly, and that's what they're doing. And there's
amazing. We'll get to a couple of comments here before we get going. So Nick, again, make them feel valued and grow their talents, even if that means they move on from your company. You owe it to them. They have helped build your company. And I think that, to me, that's one of the reasons being in sales training. One of the biggest things that I hear from people is, but if I train them and then they leave, I'm like, well, what if you don't train them and they stay? Like,
See, and that's just
there's-
such the worst mentality too. I mean, so not go, just because you triggered this point. It takes what it takes. The Trevor Millard book, and neutral thinking. His big thing is um, is not. It's not overreacting and staying there. But he was with Nick Saban. Everybody knows Nick Saban, coach of Alabama, amazing team. But Nick Saban's mentality was, let's not train the mules. Going back to the mules Clydesdale, what if I just make my Clydesdale even better?
No.
And so that's where he went. Was he went to the Clydesdale and raised their level, and it raised everybody around, and that's why you have Alabama winning year after year after year.
Yeah, no, you've got to you've got to give those people an opportunity. And you know what? Yes, you are going to. We lose people, and we lose some good people sometimes because the grass is greener on the other side. They're promised a lot of times it's just somebody, it could be somebody being vindictive, which does happen in this business. And we will lose people. And quite often, it's for more money, or it's usually for 99% of the time, it's for more money. And then they find
and it's usually more money right up at the front, like a signing bonus. What I've noticed is a signing bonus or something. And they're like, well, I'm living out of my means as it is now. So that signing bonus would really do me well because I kind of got myself in trouble. And then all of a sudden it's, everything's promised. Of course, everything's promised. But what's actually delivered is another story most of the time.
More often, you know what? I'm not going to say it always happens, but quite often we will lose people and then they will try to come back.
Yes.
And we have made exceptions through the, through the years, but we, as a rule, we're the same company they left, and they're usually the same people that left, and it's just not good. And it's best usually if they move on. Sometimes you do make exceptions.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've actually had some great people leave to go into other industries. Mm-hmm. And then they found out that they had a real passion for this. And as you and I talked earlier, Dan, I think that people in the logistics and trucking sectors are sometimes they're stress junkies, and they are. And you get, it goes from boredom to terror in a heartbeat all day long. And they love it. And then they go into something that's very mundane, and they go, what's missing from my life? I'm really miserable here. Yeah, maybe I'm making a few dollars more, and I'm not working as hard, but God, this is awful work. I'm not doing this. This isn't what I thought I was signing up for. And then all of a sudden you end up getting a phone call saying, you know what? Real estate isn't what I thought it was. Because it's a totally different thing. And you do get calls too from people that keep in touch, and they go, you know what? This was a much better thing. I feel a lot better. I didn't not everybody loves the stress. Okay. There are some people that can't take it. And we found when we were hiring a lot of students at one point, we were recruiting from colleges and universities, and the majority of them, what we did find was we were a great training ground. And then what would happen is our competition would come, and these people weren't fully trained, but our competition didn't know that. And you could only pay them so much because they weren't trained.
Yes.
So the competition picked them off thinking, oh my God, I'm getting a trained Clydesdale here. And they got a Clydesdale, and they found out that this wasn't a Clydesdale.
It was a Clydesdale with one broken foot or something.
There's a wonderful sales book, and I forget the name of the author. And I took a one-night course, and actually, I had him on our Rates and Lanes podcast one night, and he wrote a book called Sales Dogs.
Sales Dogs.
Yes.
Sales Dogs. I've never heard of that one.
Well, now this individual that wrote the book, he's a great guy, and he came from the trucking industry, and he built, I think they were hauling a lot of air freight out of the out of LAX, if I'm not mistaken. And the book, it's very easy reading. I took the course. It was like a one evening course. I actually brought my whole sales staff many, many years ago. And I was so impressed with the book and with the course that I had him on the show. And one of the things I remember him saying is there are three types of salespeople. You have your pit bull, you have your Labrador retriever, and you have your poodle. And there's a place for all of them. And you know, in any sales organization, you have those three.
Yep.
And you need them all. And you know what? Sometimes you need to parachute the poodle in because he can take over an account or diffuse the situation. And sometimes you need to send the pit bull.
It was always funny. I know we got to get going because we're way over time, DJ. Sorry, but you know, it was always funny because anytime you would see somebody leave a company, the pit bulls would come out, and they'd always send the pit bulls in to close the account and keep the account when the person left. And yeah, you're right, because there is certain times you need everyone.
Wrong doesn't always work.
No, 100%. I mean,
that's
my
one of those
good friend
cases.
Bobby is a perfect example of that.
That's one of those cases of not knowing who you're dealing with, not knowing your customer.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so good. Oh my
big
goodness.
question is, DJ, did you see the conversation going this way? And does your quote match the goal?
Listen, I will be completely transparent and honest. I cheated. I went to a leadership Simon Sinek quote because I just love Simon so much.
Because you knew it was about leadership. Got it.
And I knew. I mean, come on. He went to $1 billion. The only way you get there is by being a good leader. So I don't care how good you are.
I do need to say something. I was not the only one in leadership at Traffix. We had, I had blessed with 4 incredible partners, and each one of them brought their own set of unique and strong talents. Okay, that's number one. And then those leaders, everybody had their own people that worked with them, were right beside them, and they were incredible leaders. So it was, to get to this number, it's all about leadership.
Yes.
You are the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes. Bingo. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Chuck, for coming on. And hopefully you will come on again. I know you said you'll mention that story in another show, so maybe we'll do that.
Love to do it. A lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you to American Logistics Interior and Trucking for making this possible. Again, Sales Chatter Live, guys, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. till 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. If we don't go over, because the show is so great, like today, thanks you, Chuck, for going over with us, and everybody who did stay. If you are watching the replay on YouTube, like and subscribe, hit the little bell, do all the fun stuff so that you catch us next time when we are live. Again, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. till 9:30. Don't miss tomorrow, Triple D Day, guys. Data Day.
Data Day. We're going to talk about oil. We're going to talk about fuel. We're going to talk about flatbeds. We got a whole bunch of data to share with you. Don't miss it.
That's right. Don't miss it. And the quote to take us out, guys. Simon Sinek, like I mentioned, great leaders must have 2 things: a vision of the world that does not yet exist, and the ability to communicate that vision clearly.
Touche. Well put.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information